Haddon said that a lot of clients want to shade the facts in a way that favors them because they've done terrible things. It's funny that he's talking about a criminal case. He's already represented John and Patsy before Kobe. And he's saying that I deal with a lot of clients who I represent in criminal cases. And a lot of them lie. A lot of them lie because they've done terrible things. But Kobe didn't lie. You guys jump on a plane, fly to Atlanta. Don't come back until I tell you to. And if you do come back, lay low. So we talked a little bit about Hal Haddon of Haddon, Morgan and Foreman, and we know that Hal Haddon is, the lawyer for the Ramseys, and how he has been consistently rated a super lawyer in Colorado, at least, if not in the nation. And so when we talk about Haddon, we know that John Ramsey is in good hands with this. And I'm going to talk a little bit more extensively about this legal strategy, but I wanted to mention a couple of things about Hal Haddon in terms of his celebrity representation. And some of you may know of a gentleman by the name of Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant died recently, a couple years back, in a helicopter crash. And he and his daughter and other teammates, they were trying to fly to a basketball game in a helicopter, and he died. But, Kobe was a legend in the NBA, and he was with the LA Lakers for a long time. And so Kobe's loss was extremely important, and it was very felt in the NBA community, National Basketball Association, as well as in the world in general, because Kobe was such an iconic figure. But in 03 or 04, something like that, Kobe got in trouble in Colorado. He got entangled with a young lady. Now, Kobe was married, and he had readily admitted that he had gotten entangled with a young lady who later accused him of taking advantage of her. And so he called Haddon, Morgan and Foreman and had a chat with them, and to see if he couldn't get out of it and whatnot. And eventually the case was dismissed. But I wanted to read a couple of notes and kind of discuss very lightly. Like I said, I'm going to present this later at some point in terms of the legal strategy. But I just wanted to kind of note here some things that I noticed as I was reading through this. And what this is called the Haddon oral history, or it's the oral history of Hal Haddon, to where they just kind of, sat down. It's about 226 pages. They just sat down and asked them about, several things, on his mind. The JonBenet Ramsey case was one of the things. So some of the notes I took was that what I want to know more about, and what Haddon mentions is kind of, in no uncertain terms, he mentions some of the emotional parts of the case of Kobe. And in part, I think of what he was trying to do was trying to drive the emotions of Kobe Bryant as a human being. And so I wanted to know a little bit more about emotion-driven cases, because in my mind, that would be very similar to the Ramsey case. The need to establish John and Patsy as humans. They're parents with children, and they love their children. And as the world in general, you guys can relate to parents with children, and yourself, you would never do that. So we can't jump to or rush to conclusions with Patsy and John, nor should we ever consider them in this case. It would be to their best interest that they not be considered, because I don't want my clients to go to jail. What kind of lawyer would I be? So that's one of the things. And he goes on to talk about several things like that Kobe was also interested in. And he notes that Kobe was very involved in the case. Kobe was asking questions in the case. And Kobe didn't go to college, he mentions, but he does say that Kobe was very intelligent. Kobe just finished high school and then went straight into to the league. He was drafted straight from high school into the pros. But Kobe wanted to understand more about the tactical significance, as they call it. What's our approach? What's our strategy here? And then the legal basis for certain things, so as to know if somebody is bringing a claim against me, what's the importance of that claim, right? Is what he wanted to know. And so Haddon was there to kind of walk him through those things. And I think Haddon said that, they talked every day for about 18 months. I think the case or the trial lasted about 18, 19 months. And he said Kobe, even though Kobe was flying back and forth to LA, still playing in games, he said, they talked about every day for, 18 months. So Kobe was on it. Kobe was very involved. And it took a year, I think he said, about 2 years, something like that, almost 2 years to get this thing dismissed, is what I gathered from that. And so essentially, the idea that they wanted to navigate through these very intricate legal issues, very complex issues, very slowly and methodically. And that's kind of revealing a little bit about the strategy. One of the things that I did put a star by was Kobe was honest. And Haddon says that Kobe was very honest with him, even to the point that it was embarrassing. And he goes on to say that Haddon says that this is pretty rare in criminal practice. And another star that I said that Haddon said that a lot of clients want to shade the facts in a way that sort of favors them because they've done terrible things. Now, it's interesting because this is chapter 25, and I believe the chapter before this, the chapter before this is on John and Patsy Ramsey, which I'll do another video talking about that as well. But the chapter before this is on John and Patsy Ramsey. And so it's funny that he's talking about a criminal case, in which he's already represented John and Patsy before Kobe. And he's saying that I deal with a lot of clients who I represent in criminal cases. And a lot of them lie. A lot of them lie because they've done terrible things. But Kobe didn't lie. The thing about me, the thing that gets me about this is that, words are powerful. You listen to words and what people say. What did you mean to say? And if you're not correcting yourself on certain things. So those are two things that I put a star by because those are interesting to me. But he goes on to say that he said that the media was the worst part of of Kobe Bryant's case. And he mentioned that it really on both sides. It was pretty bad for Kobe and it was bad for the accuser of Kobe. And but like I said, he goes on to say that, man, there was a lot of crazy stuff that happened in the tabloids and whatnot, and people just kind of waiting. He said one guy crawled up in a tree and was waiting for Kobe. But he goes on to say that the Ramseys had some elements, but Kobe was the worst. The Ramseys had some elements, but Kobe was the worst. And that stuck out to me because, this is the lawyer of John and Patsy Ramsey, who was there from the very beginning. Remember, he came in on the 27th. And as he says, in the chapter prior about John and Patsy Ramsey, it says, hey, Brian Morgan was already in town. He said, I was out in a remote part of Colorado and I jumped and came back as soon as I could. But, Brian was already on the ground getting ready to work and starting the journey. But the Ramseys had some elements of the Kobe Bryant trial. Now, of course, you can say Kobe was bigger. Kobe had obviously, he's an NBA star. He's international, so it's going to be a lot worse. But the fact that he points out and says the Ramseys had some elements, the way the Ramseys tell it is that if you let them tell it, they had all of the elements of the media circus and the media frenzy. But you have their high-powered lawyer saying that the Ramseys had a little bit, but not to the level of Kobe. So the question, the thing I'm getting at is, are the Ramseys overplaying the media hype just a little bit? That's the real question that I'm coming to. Another point that I note is that he calls the CBI, the Colorado Bureau of Investigations. He says they're and he goes into, because he's talking about DNA at this point. He calls them very capable experts in terms of DNA analysis. Now, you remember, if you look in the reports of if you look in the police reports, how they sent out the DNA analysis to the CBI. The CBI sent it out to other people just to kind of continue to get an understanding of what is going on in the forensic analysis and the DNA analysis. Here we are saying that the CBI was very capable. This is a choice, and I bring this up to say that the CBI was a choice that the BPD made to send the DNA to for testing. When we criticize, when the Ramseys criticize the police, here is another point in which, and John and Patsy's attorney agrees, the cops actually did their job, and they actually did their job quite well. They actually put the DNA into the hands of people who were quite capable of handling this analysis. Furthermore, Chedabowski from the Colorado Bureau of Investigations said that, hey, we still have questions. We're analyzing Patsy Ramsey's handwriting, and we still have questions for her. So we want to hang on to that. That is heavily disputed by the Ramseys. But what we're seeing here is that the police did their job. Of all the mess ups and the mishaps that the police had, according to the Ramseys, and how they're not looking for anything, they're not trying to solve the case, Haddon is going to come back and say, well, you know, they did the right thing by sending it to the CBI. They're very capable. And that's in terms, it's not even in terms of the Ramsey case. It's in terms of the Kobe Bryant case. And saying, hey man, these guys analyze DNA pretty well. Let's send it over to them, which is what the BPD did very early in the case. In fact, in month number 1, in January, they sent it over. And so what we see here is that even though John is saying, you guys are trash, to the BPD, the lawyer is coming back and saying, well, no, you know, I trust the CBI. I trust what they're doing. And so this is where the police sent the work. So the police were doing the job. Yeah. Another point I have here is I want to look a little bit more into his perspective on prosecutors. He mentioned good prosecutors, cops and investigators look at every side, and they look under every rock. And so I want to understand a little bit more about, and this is, you know, part of his strategy to get all of the facts, to look at every single thing. And that's part of him being so pushy, in a way, I guess you could call it. So pushy against the police. So some of the actions that come from the Ramseys legal defense team are not necessarily reflective of the police doing a terrible job. It's really reflective of maybe sometimes the police are just not giving the Ramseys defense team what they want. That's just probably what it is in some cases, more often than not, because he goes on to say, you know, some of these prosecutors, they get blinded by the limelight, and they get blinded by the media, and they're not so they're not so good prosecutors. And so I wonder, you know, the Vanity Fair article talks a little bit about how Haddon was kind of in the mindset that he could basically spank, you know, DA Hunter. So he wasn't really worried about him because he knew, and I don't think it's all the fact that he knew he could spank DA Hunter. It's also the fact that he knows that DA Hunter is really not about that. He's really not about taking things to trial. So it's like, I really don't have anything. There's never any real threat because I don't really have to deal with this DA taking anything to trial because he's not going to do it. So I can talk trash if I know that you're not going to do it anyway. I can bully you all day and we can get into an argument, and that changes the tone of how I talk to you. If you know somebody's not really about that, that changes the tone, right? Because people are talking. If you see somebody talking a lot of smack and you look at them and be like, shut up, you ain't gonna do nothing. That changes the energy, right? And so that's what I kind of think Haddon had for some of these prosecutors. He's an older lawyer in the game. So he's like sizing people up when they come in, whether they're going to do something or not. And he looks at Hunter and says, he's not going to do anything. So there's really no threat. If you really think about it, there's really no threat at all. The chances of the Ramseys being taken to trial is not there. It's just not. So they already start off on a good foot because they're not going to be taken to trial because DA Hunter, his track record is the fact that, he's already in the mindset that you can't find any evidence really. So it's like what even outside of the Ramsey case, what evidence would be enough? What evidence would be good for you for us to even move forward with this? As we know, as Steve Thomas said, look, man, we compiled, a 2-day presentation. And after a 2-day presentation, this guy turns around and tells us, I'm not convinced. I don't know. Okay, you're actually supposed to be the person as the DA. You're actually supposed to be the person that's leading us and telling us what to do and where to look. You should be doing that. But instead of saying, yes, I like what you're doing, go here, go there, do this, do that, he didn't give him any feedback. Even after the trial, the grand jury trial, he didn't give any feedback on the next steps. He was very silent on that. Where do we go? What do we do? So when you know you're coming up against somebody in that case like that, you have nothing to worry about. All you need to do, and it's like being in school or having a boss. Some bosses are more lenient than others, right? Some teachers are more lenient than others. I can turn this paper in. I can just write some mumbo jumbo, make some things look good, quote some people, cite some sources, and we're going to get on out of here with an A. But some teachers and some bosses have more of a critical eye. And so you know that you have to do a little bit more work to prove. You have to solidify your argument a little bit more to present to this teacher because you know that they're not just going to hand you an A. Haddon already knows, 30 years of dealing with this same guy. He has history. I know him inside and out. He's not going to bring anything to trial. He doesn't want to do it. He's a lenient teacher. I'm going to turn in this assignment. I'm just going to I'm going to pepper a couple of things out there like, Alex, think about this. And really, Alex, it shows a lot about Alex Hunter because Alex Hunter apparently becomes overwhelmed with a bunch of evidence being thrown at against him. And that apparently makes him lose all sense of direction. Now he doesn't know which way to turn and where to look. And that's one of the issues I think Haddon was aware of that he could use to his advantage. And so wondering a little bit about, how he feels in his approach to attacking his opponent, playing chess, not checkers. Another thing that I did highlight, or I did put a star by, was the cops told Kobe when Kobe was in the hospital for something. He was getting some surgery done in Colorado. And the cops came by to do an assault kit on him. I'm calling it an assault kit. It's obviously the R word, but they were coming by to get his DNA information or his information for an assault kit to check against the girl that was accusing him. And they said, and they deuced out after they took his information, his DNA and stuff like that. Said, peace out. We're gone. You're free to go. And they said, but we're going to need you to come in tomorrow. We're going to have to have some questions to ask you. Kobe goes and gets on a payphone to call Haddon, Morgan, and Foreman at the request of his of his agent. At the request of his agent, he goes and he gets on a payphone. You know, you can't track a payphone. You know, in 2004, you ain't using no payphone. You got a cell phone if you're a big star like that. But Kobe goes and he gets on a payphone. That means that Kobe went out of his way. Now, I love Kobe. I'm not talking down on Kobe. I'm just saying. Kobe was instructed. I have to believe that Kobe was instructed to go out of his way to go get quarters, to go use a payphone. Quarters, dimes, nickels, whatever. It's been a while since I've seen a payphone. And I didn't use payphones. I don't have much experience with payphones. I've seen them used, but I used them like once or twice. But he's going to go get change to use this payphone. That means it's a deliberate act to go do that. So he goes and does that, and he gets the number from his agent. Says, you need to call these people. And he calls Haddon, and Haddon picks up the phone. Haddon has actually been briefed already by Kobe's agent. So Haddon calls down to his wife, says, babe, Kobe Bryant's about to call. When you pick up the phone, send it up to me. Kobe is told, after he gets the assault kit, after he completes his assault kit, Kobe is told, hey, by the cops. The cops are like, hey, we're leaving, but can you come in tomorrow? When Kobe calls Haddon, Haddon says, let me tell you what you do. Haddon says, let me tell you what you do. Where's your plane at? And it was, what's your transportation like? Kobe says, well, I have a private plane. It's sitting over here at this airport. And Haddon says, I'll tell you what you do. You jump, essentially, in so many words, you jump back on that plane and you fly back to LA. Don't even worry about it. We'll take care of it. Jump on a plane and fly back to LA. I bring that up because it's like, who else did that? The Ramseys. You know what? You guys jump on a plane and fly to Atlanta. And don't come back until I tell you to. And if you do come back, lay low. Because what Haddon told Kobe in no uncertain terms, and let me essentially try to see if I can't find it. Here's a story that, he calls him and he says, so we talked. He was calling from a payphone in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. What he related to me is that he was here getting an operation on his knee, blah, blah, blah. And he said to me, well, what do I do? And this is Haddon responding. He said, I don't know enough about your situation to tell you how serious it is, but I can tell you that there's no way you're going to Eagle County Sheriff's Office tomorrow to talk to them. What have you got for transportation? He said, well, I've got a private plane. I said, where's your private plane? He said, well, it's in Eagleville Airport. I said, well, you're in Glenwood Springs now, and I suggest that you tell your pilot to fly to Aspen. And I have a good friend who's going to pick you up at Glenwood Springs Hospital and drive you to the Aspen Airport. Get in your plane and fly back to LA, and we'll deal with it. He told the man, you ain't going in nowhere. Fly back to LA. Who is that? That's the Ramseys. Kobe goes on, we're going into 18 months. DA in Eagle County or whatever. He doesn't really respect them. Gets a report about the woman accuser, and basically just questions all the DNA evidence and said the guy really didn't look at the DNA evidence. The person accusing Kobe didn't really look at the DNA evidence, and kind of saying here that the DNA evidence was withheld from us. We had to file motions to get it. and the arguments against giving it to us were nonsense. It was foolishness. And so basically, we can see here that Haddon, Morgan, and Foreman are requesting all of this thing, just like the Vanity Fair article said. They're requesting a lot of information, even like Detective Steve Thomas confirmed. They're requesting a lot of information so they can review this stuff and have it so they can look at all of the evidence. And so they go on to say that was never told to us. None of that exculpatory evidence was given to us except that which we had to force out. So there's force. The tactics are very brute. There's a very brute force about Haddon, Morgan, and Foreman. You're going to beat it out of you. It's what they're going to do. They're going to beat it out of you, is what we can see here. The criminal case played out over 14 months, constant motions practice, intense press notice. Going to the courthouse, 150 people, 100 to 150 people there, all kinds of satellite trucks, media frenzy. Press was hideous on both sides, but sort of hideous. But it was sort of hideous, balanced. It was adverse to the accuser as it was. It was as adverse to the accuser as it was to Kobe. And yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. And so Kobe's involved, spending hours focusing on the case. And he goes on to say here, he never, ever, ever, ever told me anything that I considered to be untrue. It's pretty rare in criminal practice because even when your clients want you to be effective, a lot of them, because they've done terrible things, want to shade the facts in ways that are favorable to them, or want you to shade the facts with prosecutors and juries that are favorable to them, even though they're not totally accurate. I never got anything but unvarnished truth from Kobe, even when it was embarrassing. He never went to college, but he was bright and sophisticated, and you'll remember this. I sure do. People want us to shade the facts that are favorable to them, or they want you to shade facts with the prosecutors and juries that are favorable to them, even though they're not totally accurate. Now, he is saying this just after the chapter of talking to John, or talking about John and Patsy Ramsey. He's saying Kobe never lied to me. He doesn't say Kobe, similar to the Ramseys, never, ever, ever lied to me, and I believed him. He says Kobe never lied to me. I don't believe he did, is what he's saying. But he says a lot of people, it's actually pretty rare that people tell the truth in these criminal cases because they want you to believe their part, their story. The Ramseys are excluded outside of this club because you got to think the Ramseys were a huge case in terms of how the Ramseys tell us. Everybody knows about the Ramseys even now. So you would say, hey, Kobe and the Ramseys were pretty truthful if you truly believe them. But here we might see a shade of Haddon just doing his job, right? Haddon is just doing his job. Hey, man, look, I don't know what these people did. My job is to tell you that I think that people were too hard on them, and that's going to be it. That's interesting. But he's saying from Kobe was completely honest. In my opinion. Different briefs and everything, and essentially going down to the fact that Kobe was a special person. Even after the trial, Kobe, just kind of talked to him and stayed in contact and considered them part of the team. Kobe even came back down and partied with them. After the case was dismissed, they were trying to get a hold of Kobe, and Kobe wasn't playing, so he couldn't be reached. But when they actually reached him and said, hey, man, it's been dismissed, you're good. And Kobe came back and he partied with him, and he stayed up to the early morning. And then when he got early in the morning, he said, hey, I got to go back to work. I got to get back to LA. And he left. And so just essentially kind of talking about Kobe was a good kid. In their eyes, Kobe was a good kid. And just kind of closing it down with the fact that, and yeah, here's the story. but of Kobe flying back to kind of party with him, but saying, "Hey man, yeah, Kobe was a big loss for us. That really hurt." And so here is Kobe Bryant hugging Hal Haddon. Here is Kobe Bryant again with Hal Haddon, Eagle County Courthouse. And here again is Kobe Bryant, Hal Haddon. I think this is Pamela Mackey, also another individual on the case. And I think that's everything. CU Foundation, patent litigation. But yeah, that's everything. So the big thing, and I'll finish with this. The last thing was that Kobe calls from this payphone. But another thing that might be very similar to the Ramsey case was the fact that Rob Pelinka, who is now, if you're a sports fan, Rob Pelinka, who is now the general, I think he's president of basketball operations, and he's the general manager of the Los Angeles Lakers, the organization that Kobe Bryant played for his entire life as a NBA, as a professional. Pelinka at the time was Kobe Bryant's agent, meaning that he got him all the contracts and negotiated and all the contracts and stuff. But Pelinka went to Michigan, University of Michigan, went to UMich, and he was in the business school. I forget where he did his where he completed his law degree. But Pelinka is a lawyer. And so essentially what we have here is that we have, when the client gets in trouble, we have the lawyer, somebody using their lawyer expertise, even though they were a business lawyer, using their lawyer or their legal expertise, their legal connections, to call Hal Haddon, somebody who's the best in the business, to call Hal Haddon and say, "Hey, I got a situation with a client. My client's going to call you. I need you to get him out of some trouble." Same exact setup. John Ramsey and his corporate lawyer calls Hal Haddon, says, "Hey, I got a client, or I got a client that really needs your help. You're good in this case. Go over and see him, give him a call. Could you please represent him?" Same exact thing. A lawyer jumped in before, very early. This is recurring theme. A lawyer for the client jumps in very early, uses their connections to call Haddon and says, "Could you please get involved in this?" Haddon gets involved very early. People ride off into the sunset. I'm done, but let me know your thoughts if anything stood out to you, and I'll come back and talk a little bit about the second half of that when we go through the part about the chapter on JonBenet, which is a little bit shorter, which, the Kobe chapter, let me see, the Kobe chapter goes from, I should have counted the other page before I even got here. The Kobe chapter, page 143? And it's, I don't know if I'd call it lengthy, but it's got some length to it. Not just crazy and length, but it's got a little length to it. So I say 143 to 1, almost 10 pages. I don't think the Ramseys chapter was this long. Even though it was a huge case, I don't think the Ramseys chapter was this long. So anyways, let me know what you think, and I'll be right back with the JonBenet Ramsey perspective on how he talked about their case. So thanks for watching.